Good afternoon and good morning to the audience out there. My name is Helen Beale, and today, this Range 4 webcast, we're going to be talking about DevOps discoveries and transformations, and I'm joined by my colleague Ryan Dobson. Say hello, Ryan.
Good afternoon, everyone.
So just
Hello.
a little preamble on Arrange 4, first of all. So Arrange 4, we are a DevOps specialty consultancy, so we specialise in helping people use DevOps thinking to make their businesses better. So we have this motto that we're fanatical about making life on earth fantastic, and we help people make their working lives better by using DevOps principles. Many of you on the webcast have been on webcasts with us before, so you know we do a wide range of subjects. We're particularly excited about this one today because this is an absolutely core service that we provide to our clients. We've done many of these, so it's really good to have an opportunity to talk specifically about this. So Ryan, you picked these stats to kick us off today to set the scene about DevOps. So what can we learn from this, and where is it from?
Yeah, so I pulled this from the State of DevOps report by Puppet Labs for last year. So it's an interesting stat. It basically rates sort of what they class as high performers, so those enterprise companies that have implemented sort of 99% of all sort of DevOps throughout the business, i.e. Sort of working in sort of product-focused teams, have a lot of automation set up, working in the cloud, etc. To those that they rate as sort of low performers, which are just on the first step towards a sort of DevOps transformation as such. So what this slide basically tells us, so it's probably worth clarifying actually that in the State of DevOps report, if anyone's read it out there, definitely worth reading. Two of the main things that they focus on in terms of sort of improvements that you can see. Two of them were, so the first one was excess rework, and we'll go a little bit more into this, and the other one was actually the cost of downtime as well. So this is initially looking at the cost of rework. So what it shows is the overall goal of DevOps is to have a 10% of excess rework going on in the business at any time. Generally, high performers, or what they class as high performers, are knocking around 21% at the moment. Moving down to medium performance 32, low performance 27. So what this shows is sort of as a result, you're able to spend sort of 49% of your own time on new work, such as features that add actual value to the business, rather than obviously going back over to already released features that need some tweaking. What's interesting to note is that the low performers spend less time on rework than medium performers, so that's 27% to 32, but more time on actual new work. Now, what this might be showing is probably the low performers actually sort of ignoring critical rework, so they can actually push new features. I think this actually, we expand on this in the next slide. What it shows is that we're trying to move away from having too much excess rework and able to focus on more new innovative ideas
So
in the
excess
business.
rework is basically waste, isn't it? We're redoing stuff because we didn't get it right the first time. We put a bug in it, or we've shipped it with a bug in it and stuff. So it's kind of waste. I think it's worth mentioning as well. This is from the 2016 report, right? And these reports are really good reads. But I think this is either the fourth or the fifth year that they ran them. Obviously, we're in the new year now, 2017. So we've got that to look forward to. I think it normally comes out about mid-year. I'm sure they'll launch a survey soon. And I think Ryan, I think this is really important because we do this such a lot with our customers. It's like it's quite difficult to get the M in calm sometimes. So those of you that are familiar with the CALMS acronym as a kind of elevator acronym to describe what DevOps is all about, that's culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. The measurement bit traditionally has been overlooked, I think, or misunderstood. But this gives us some opportunities to really put some hard savings onto DevOps related activities when we get involved with transformations and various things. So this next slide you were just referring to, what's this telling us based on what we just learned about the amount of excess rework in these different types of organizations?
Yeah, so I think this is important, just covering on off what you just said, especially customers that we work with. You know, pe people are looking for or to put a figure on um, the improvements that you're going to see from moving to DevOps. I mean, that is still is a big thing now. People are looking into it, and people are understanding much more of how DevOps will benefit the overall business. But it's important still, especially for sort of the business side as such. Um, to be able to see sort of where those improvements will come and overall, obviously, what profits or savings they're going to be looking to make. So, what this graph actually shows us is the cost of excess rework per year. So it's basically the way it's calculated is an average staff size of a large technical organisation. So you're probably looking around 40,000 engineers, times by the average salary, times by the benefits multiplier, and times by the percentage of time spent on excess rework. So going back to the slide that we just covered, obviously different amounts of rework for high performers, low performers, and medium performers. Thank you. Um, so what this actually shows us is how much savings that you can actually expect to be making um, depending on where you sit in this graph, obviously if you're medium to large, small to medium, or a large enterprise business. These are some average figures taken from an in-depth study by Puppet Labs on the cost and savings that you can actually expect to make just in 1 year of moving into a DevOps way of thinking, a DevOps sort of mind frame, and reducing that excess rework down to the overall goal of 10%. And again, it's just worth bearing in mind as well, this is just the savings of the cost of excess rework, not on any other areas of the business that will also look to improve. Um, does that make sense if I explain that?
Yeah, that's fine. I think it's kind of interesting to note here as well that they're high performers, even though they're already high performers, they still have an opportunity to reduce excess rework. They've still got a lot. And here's the other the other stat or the other measurement that you referred to. So your cost of downtime. So what have we got here?
Um, yeah, so again, this is, sorry, like you just said, yeah, the cost of downtime. So just to clarify how this is sort of calculated again at the top, deployment frequency. So how many deployments are you doing? I think this is gone yearly. Yes, this is measurement on yearly deployments. Times by the change failure rate, times by the mean time to recover, and times the hourly cost of outage. So as you can see, they've given an average cost of outage for $500,000 per hour. Obviously, that will differ depending on the size of the business. So if you was to, obviously the overall goal of DevOps is to reduce the outage as much as possible, right?
Eliminate them.
Obviously, if you reduce, well, eliminating them, yeah. So if you can reduce that down, to the very minimum, if not eradicate it completely, these are the type of savings that you're looking to make. So the low performers where they currently sit on the DevOps chart as such, as I said, sort of first step on the ladder. So they're starting to look at the culture, they're starting to look at automation, but probably not made much steps towards it. What they can expect moving up the spectrum into a much sort of faster way of working, much more safer way of working. You're looking at $2.82 million just in the sort of first year,
That's a
just by
per
eliminating.
deployment, actually. That's not even the year. The total cost of downtime in the year is 19 million.
Oh,
Low performer in that chart. So it's a lot of money, isn't it? And I think what would be really useful for organisations, because a lot of people we work with don't have the ability to do this today, but by working with people like Dynatrace, have the ability to actually measure that downtime real time. So being able to look at the depressing figure of how much money we just lost because that application went down. And one of our customers had an outage just this morning, it's a bird charity, and so it was basically a dependency on LDAP that was hidden in the application. What was interesting is that it did take them a little while to fix it, but I asked them whether it was the performance monitoring tool that helped them find the root cause, and it was partly. It showed them what was broken, but what the customer said was how they discovered or why something was broken was actually to do with their change management process. And I think as we go through some of the results of previous DevOps discoveries that we've done, what we'll see is that DevOps thinking isn't just about doing a tool, or those can be so powerful. And in terms of downtime, it's not just being able to measure it, it's also about being able to recover. So having safe failure environments where you can, for example, redeploy to last known good state almost instantly is one thing that's really important. But then the other part is about the process. So we'll talk about OIA a little bit more in a minute when we talk about the assessments as a three-step approach to look at your maturity level. So if you've finished on that slide, Ryan, I'm going to move on, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about the DevOps assessment for a little while. So we wanted to talk about DevOps discoveries today, and we kind of use the word discovery and assessment sometimes a bit interchangeably. The assessment is a specific piece of work that fits under our banner of discovery type activities. And what we're really trying to do is help people understand where they are, where they want to go, and how to get there. So it's those three things. It's baselining the current state, it's helping articulate the desired future state, and it's defining the roadmap between those two states. So we've performed tens of these in the past few years, and in fact we probably performed hundreds of these in the last 15 or so years, because the DevOps assessment actually started out as something called PIA, which was a process improvement assessment. Those of you who know Range 4 well will know that we incorporated just 5.5 years ago, but those of you that know us even better will know that some of us have worked together for a long time in previous organisations. In fact, this is where the PIA originated from. So we've taken the PIA and we gave it a DevOps upgrade, if you like. So in particular, we did two main things. One was we incorporated a whole lot of culture on cultural assessment into the approach. So you remember me just talking about CAMS or CAMS, the acronym to describe DevOps, and the C being culture in that. You'll also have just heard me say OIA. So when I say OIA, I'm actually talking about organisation, interactions, and automation as the three component steps or parts that we take when we're assessing maturity as part of this sort of engagement. And those of you might be sitting there going, OIA, organisation, interactions, automation, that sounds vaguely familiar, and you'll probably be familiar with people process tools. People process tools is a mantra that we've used for a very long time in software development about being the correct approach. Get the people right, get the roles right, get the culture right first, then you can start looking at your processes and your value streams, and when you have them clear, then you can put automation around them and you can optimise those processes that you've identified. So we've got a whole load of cultural maturity assessment that we do within this programme of work, and that gives us actually like a part of a quantified figure. The rest of the quantified figure is around the maturity of the interactions and the automation, and for both of those we use something that we call IVA, which is our DevOps loop. So it's our ideation to realisation continuous release cycle. So we look at the maturity of each of those areas. So how well you manage ideation, so how well you identify requirements, how well you manage them, how well you prioritize them and refine them in things like product backlogs, because hopefully you're on an agile journey as well as part of this. And then all the way through to how you integrate your software. And we tend to talk about integrating software these days more than building or coding software, because most of our customers are composing applications these days, often with open source pieces, and we'll talk a bit more about building security in, I'm sure, in a few moments on how to handle that. And then the validation piece, which is very much integrated into the integration piece, because we're always talking about shifting left in DevOps and doing testing much, much earlier, performance testing and functional testing, making sure everything that goes out the door is of the highest quality possible, as well as at high speed. And then the automation piece. So the other big thing that we did when we upgraded the PIA or the PIA to the DMA, the DevOps Maturity Assessment, is we also created a thing called the DMI, and this is what enables us to give us a single score out of 100 to an organisation in terms of their maturity. And this is really important because the assessment is the first step in a journey. It is baselining that current state and laying out the ground for the journey ahead and all the activities that will happen and what the quantified anticipated impact will be. So we just looked at, for example, the cost of downtime and the cost of excess work. And within the DMA report, there should be business cases that will show you what savings you will have at which points in time when certain activities are complete. And the DMI allows us to rescore. So typically every 6 months, we'll rescore the DMI and see the progression being made and be able to celebrate success with our customers, or see where we need to make additional improvements. So broadly speaking, you can see here that it's a 3-day on-site engagement. It's actually 10 consulting days in total. It's 5 days from 2 consultants. We spend the first 2 days on site doing initially a project stakeholder kickoff meeting. And then we introduced sort of late last year, as in 2015 actually, so 2 years ago, the participant kind of briefing. So what we were finding is that people increasingly felt they hadn't been briefed before walking into the room, and they were either a bit nervous or unsure or felt unprepared. So we do a quick sort of hour about what is DevOps, why we're doing the assessment, what the high level objectives are for the stakeholders for undertaking this piece of work. And then we perform 12, and we've done up to 16, 17, 18 interviews previously, and they're normally back to back, about 45 minutes with a 15-minute gap between, where the consultants kind of take a breath, review any notes, make any comments to each other, and then get ready for the next interview. So the deliverables of the assessment are the report, and these are fairly lengthy reports and written specifically for each client. I've had some clients comment about kind of cookie cutter reports and things like that, and ours are very much written from scratch based on the learnings in every particular client. And 40 or 60 pages long. We put together a presentation, a PowerPoint that goes alongside that, because the next time we come on site, that 3rd day, is we're actually presenting back our findings. Some clients choose to have those findings just with the stakeholders. Some want the interviewees or a subsection of the interviewees to be incorporated in part of that discussion as well. And then that enables us to move into the transformation phase. It's probably worth noting at this point as well that there's kind of, broadly speaking, 2 types of organisations that want to engage with us in this type of work. It's either the people that really feel that they're not doing any DevOps at the moment at all, they're completely greenfield and don't know where to start, or those ones that know that they have had some initiatives already, and it's almost like a health check for them. So it's less of a maturity assessment, more of a maturity assessment for them and less of a readiness assessment. So, Ryan, we were talking earlier about why organisations engage Ranger 4 to do this, why they don't just do this themselves. And from your point of view, what are the top level reasons that people don't self-assess?
Yeah, so just to cover on the last page and what you said, I think the importance of having sort of a third party or sort of another pair of eyes to look into it. I mean, like 99% of the customers that we work with, as much as they know that there needs to be change or they're willing to change, you know, they know that there's improvements they need to make. I mean, like Helen, you've been on site, obviously, involved in the actual pieces of work more than I have, but, you know, how many times we see that people just didn't realise that certain processes were going on. Certain things were taking 10 times as long as they actually really thought they were. You know, that's why it's so important to get a baseline, a bird's eye view of everything that's going on in the business, every part of the technology area. You know, getting baseline numbers, baseline KPIs, baseline metrics on sort of exactly where they are. Because then once you know where you are, you know how to get to where you want to go. Exactly. Your question was sort of why don't people try and do this themselves? By all means, try and do it yourself. But what it is that we bring to businesses is sort of the best practice in a sense. So as you mentioned earlier, sort of there's 150, 200 plus companies that we've done the assessments with, the transformations with. What we bring with that is we've been there, seen it and done it. A lot of the earlier ones, I can imagine a lot of mistakes were made, a lot of learning, a big learning curve for us as well as the companies. Whereas now what we have is sort of a fine-tuned understanding of what works, what doesn't work for particular companies and especially industries as well, and also individuals. It just gives that independent view the outside look of, right, what is actually going on, speaking to other areas of the business that certain individuals wouldn't necessarily want to or even be able to speak to. And it allows us to bring everyone together in one room to give them the facts and sort of say how it is really. But again, use our expertise from the amount of times that we've done it. What works, doesn't work. So it basically saves time in a sense. A
I
typical
think that's
transformation could last.
it is a good point actually, because we do hear a lot of customers say that they haven't got the time to save time, and often just taking a break from business as usual to do this type of work is really hard for people to do. But I think the other points you make are really key. So, consultants have a reputation sometimes of using a client's watch to tell them what the time is. I think, and that metaphor is trying to say that we don't tell the client anything that they don't already know. And I think to an extent there's a truth in that we're mirroring what we're told. Obviously, I mean, the whole engagement in an assessment is to interview the people and then compile what we've heard and present that back with the roadmap. But there are best practices, as you have said. It's all about best practice. It's all about what we've learned in all of our other engagements and what we know as, for want of a better term, thought leaders in this particular market space. So that's really important. And I think the other thing that I think is really key that often gets missed is because we're external, we're not kind of caught up in any politics, and any organisation has politics because we're humans. So that external view of being able to come in and see stuff and highlight it's really key. I was doing some training, actually. It wasn't an assessment. I was in Switzerland doing some training last year, and we'd literally done like the first morning, and we'd just been talking about the concept of never allowing a known defect passed downstream, which is a key DevOps principle. And as we went to break, the guys all disappeared, and then the head of the team that brought me over to do the training said, actually, we've just had an incident. I want you to come up to the war room. So I went up to the war room, which was quite a funky one. They were standing around in some beanbags and stuff. But what he was so angry about is the incident had been caused by a bug that they had identified 2 days earlier and had asked for it not to be released. But because of various business pressures and things, this thing had been released and it had caused a problem. It brought the whole of the internal system in Germany down, so a whole country weren't able to work for a few hours. So, I think that those level of knowing, people know sometimes what their problems are, but they need someone else to come in and reflect it back at them. And I always say that I do hope there is some stuff that we can find that they weren't really aware of as well. Mm-hmm. So I put this slide up to kind of emphasise this point I was trying to make about, and I don't like the term very much, but this kind of thought leadership. Arrange for, we do spend all day, every day talking to DevOps, whether we're delivering training or doing an assessment or working on a transformation or speaking at a conference or writing papers or whatever it is. We live and breathe this stuff. So naturally, I would hope that we're at the forefront of understanding what DevOps is about. And I wanted to pop this slide in as it's a new piece of work that I've just started. I was out in Munich in December at DevOps Con, and I did a presentation that I'll probably talk about again in a minute, because it was the correlations between DevOps and holacracy. I did that presentation for the first time in June at the DevOps Enterprise Summit in London with Lego, which is one of the transformation stories we're going to talk about in a minute. So I was doing this presentation in Munich, and John Willis was also there. And for people that don't know who John Willis is, he is the person that first came up with the acronym CAMS. Jez Humble later added the L for lean, which is why we often talk about CALMS now. And he's also one of the co-authors of the DevOps Handbook that was published in October, with Jean Kim, Patrick Dubois, and Jez Humble again being the other authors. So John was in Munich. He saw me do my holacracy presentation. We had a chat the next morning, and he said he was about to talk about his view of DevOps as the three-legged stool. And he'd also heard me talk about a term that I stole from our very good friend Jane Grohl at the DevOps Institute about DevOps being the harmonious polygamous marriage of lean, agile, and ITSM. And many of you may have seen me do presentations on that before. So we started thinking about this, and we realised that DevOps has kind of moved on from being about agile system administration. It's even moved on from just being about breaking down the barriers between IT development and operations. It's become very broad. It's encompassing the entire value stream. We've been using a quote from James Turnbull, who was at Puppet Labs at the time, said it, about how it's not just DevOps, it's QA, and probably even sales should be in there as well. And certainly if you read the DevOps handbook, the starting point of any DevOps transformation is to map the value stream using a lean methodology. So you can see all of these different methodologies and thinkings that have lots of similarities and are all kind of converging to become this thing called DevOps. And you might be wondering what the background is. And the background is, I think they're £2 coins that have "standing on the shoulders of giants" written around them. And this is how it feels to me, that DevOps is becoming this thing that's, it's standing on what we've learned at Toyota and what Goldratt has taught us with the theory of constraints. And John particularly put in the safety culture and the learning organisation pieces in here. So there's lots of things building. So let's have a look. I did promise you 3 case stories today, so we have got 3. I can see time is ticking away with us. So the first case story I wanted to cover was Arup, and I think Kevin says there, and he really kind of summarises why people want that. Work out how to start the journey is quite difficult. Answering questions like, "Are you even ready for DevOps?" This helps people understand where they are and gives pragmatic, clear steps to make changes and help understand what things need to happen first. But Ryan and I were looking at this one earlier. There's only the 5 bullet points we wanted to put on here in terms of the recommendations that we initially made with Arup. And one was about using the cloud transformation team. And it got us thinking about how many of our clients have cloud transformation teams and are moving to the cloud and what speed they're doing it. So, Ryan, I think you had some thoughts on the importance of cloud in helping this kind of work move forward.
Yeah, I mean, so 99% of the customers obviously we work with are either thinking about it or doing a cloud transformation at the moment, and it's a thing that everybody's going to have to do at some point. So I mean, just applying the DevOps principles to moving towards that, and especially working with our close partners Dynatrace that do the sort of digital performance monitoring, having the ability to actually see the entire entire ecosystem, if you will, of everything that you're moving into the cloud, but also keeping tabs on the sort of how it's being run and what sort of stage it's at is so important, especially if you're in a highly regulated industry, or downtime's going to cost an absolute fortune. It's important to have that view and have that guidance so that like I said, nothing goes wrong, which is always important.
Yeah, absolutely. And Agile, moving on to the second point, is another one that pops up or crops up quite often where people have started an Agile transformation. And I think people say quite commonly about Scrum, it's quite simple to learn, but quite difficult to master. So we do work with lots of organisations that have tried to start on an Agile journey and maybe forgotten to keep practicing the discipline before they've kind of really got that muscle memory. And then the other big one for us that we've been working on very closely with the DevOps Institute in the last year or so is really helping operations match the velocity that the development teams are seeing. So we have a couple of courses which are for IT operations people to learn how to use Agile. One is the Agile Service Manager course, which is the IT operational equivalent of a Scrum Master, and the other is Agile Process Owner, which is the operational equivalent of the Product Owner. And the next chasm, as we call it, the Certified Agile Service Manager course, is at the end of this month on the 25th and 26th, and close to being fully booked if any of you are interested in getting a seat on that. So we often see that. And then the other thing with Arup is this aim for the end-to-end, what we call ideation to realization. So I referred to this as IVA earlier. So the ability to be able to track the value of a feature as it is developed and the cost of developing it, and then being able to measure its real business value when it goes to life. So as Ryan was talking about Dynatrace, this is a very important component of Dynatrace, not just to implement performance testing very early as you're deploying your applications into the cloud, but also to enable us to measure business value.
Mm-hmm. Which is important for overall DevOps transformations as well. How typically it's the technology that realises that there needs to be an improvement, but then how do you relay that back to the business? It's important to have that clear metrics and clear improvements, right? That you can show how everything is working, how much better it actually is by utilising what they're learning. So
absolutely. And the metrics are so key to all organisations, and we have a specific metrics that matter workshop, which is often part of somebody's transformation plan. Typically, organisations fall into one of two buckets. They've either got way too many metrics and they don't really know which ones are important, or they just have got hardly any at all.
Yeah.
And then the continuous funding bit is a great conversation. We're not going to dwell on it too much today, just to say that most organisations are trying to work in an agile manner where they're delivering things typically in 2-week sprints, but they're quite often still working in a very waterfall budgetary manner where they're going through an annual budget process, which means that you could be spending money that you thought about 12 weeks before. So it's not a very agile approach at all. Even some of the bigger organisations. So again, when I was at DUS in June, Barclays were talking about the amount of agile that they've managed to push through their strategic change projects. And then they confirmed, Jonathan Smart confirmed to me via a Twitter response that they are actually trying to move to a continuous funding model, which they call a quarterly rolling wave. And in fact, I had a conversation with another one of our customers this morning, a very old stockbroking firm, who was telling me that they've now managed to get to a 90-day budget pull down as well. So helping them match their financial velocity with their delivery and development velocity. So overall, Arup was under quite a lot of pressure from their business, just as a general dissatisfaction with the IT's ability to perform and deliver things. And it was the business full of a lot of very smart cookies. For those of you that don't know Arup as an organisation, they're almost like, the best way I find to describe them is almost like between an architect and a builder. So they're like Uber project managers for architecture, and they've got loads of specialists around things like fluid dynamics because they get involved with a lot of bridge building. They've done some amazing projects like Amsterdam's library, so very, very special bits of building work. So they've got lots and lots of smart cookies. So when the smart cookie gets bored of IT not giving them what they want, they go out and just get it themselves. So the challenge there is really about pulling that back and delivering a better service to the business. The next one I picked on today that I wanted to talk about was British American Tobacco, because this is a good example of how we engage with these larger organisations. So a lot of the organisations we work with, particularly more so in the last 9 to 12 months, I would say, are the kind of tens of thousands of employees. And the challenge with these organisations is that they are doing DevOps, and they'll be doing pockets or little mushrooms, I like to call them, of DevOps in lots of different places within the enterprise. So when we do assessments in this type of organisation, we're normally doing a number in different areas of the business and then trying to pull up the best practice and trying to have conversations around things like tool standardisation, which is always a very emotive conversation with IT professionals. So I know it's not your client, this one, Ryan, but when you look at the story of the work that we did here, were there any bits that particularly stood out for you around the transformation and where we ended up with them?
Yeah, so the sort of fragmented IT needed to increase pace and collaboration across all departments. So obviously the DevOps training across the multiple groups that we did, so that sort of the common understanding and the principles behind DevOps, I think was really important to make sure everyone actually understands how the rest of the world is working. Because I think what we find in a lot of companies, particularly BAT, was, like you said, you get a mushrooming effect that certain development teams, certain areas of the business are doing things a lot faster, a lot more innovatively than sort of other areas. So I think that was a very important point that we made and improved there as well. The moving to continuous deployment as well. Again, make it feel like breathing. It's a good statement. I think especially in every customer nowadays, being able to deploy on demand, or at least deploy as quickly as possible, is key. Keeping up with the competition, keeping up with improvements in the market. Everyone's going to have to be there at some point along the line. So the way BAT did that was brilliant, and now they're up there leading the way on that area. So yeah, I think, like you said, massive company, lots of improvements to make, but I think the ones that we did, really improved how they are as a business today.
And how the culture works and things. I think one of the things that jumped out at me again when I looked at this today is like, we do see a lot of common things in the customers and clients we do this, but I will reiterate my point about every report being unique and every organisation is unique. And of course, there are similarities. Like most people are on a cloud journey, and most people have been on some sort of agile journey. But one thing that we picked up at BAT that we saw. Another early case story we did at Platform Securities, who are part of FIS, the very large Fidelity Information Services software group, was this thing about defects and the relationship that they have with requirements. So what we found at Platform Securities, they asked us in initially to talk about the amount of defects they had in some automated testing, and we discussed it with them and suggested they undertook this piece of work. So we would be able to understand a little bit more about the surrounding processes. And what we discovered was that because Platform Securities were using a third-party piece of software that then they provided or sold as a managed service to the big banks, their development team was the third-party company. And actually the communication and collaboration around the requirements management piece was quite poor. So what were being reported as defects were actually poorly described requirements. So we were able to see quite a significant reduction in the number of what we were calling defects just from tweaking the requirements management process, not by doing coding better, not by automating testing earlier, but actually getting the requirements management process right. So the third case story I wanted to share with you today is Lego, that I did allude to earlier on. Lego, obviously a hugely successful organisation. Their problems really are around managing the growth that they've been experiencing in the past few years and that ongoing growth. They also have quite an interesting IT setup in that there's effectively two IT departments. There's CIT, corporate IT, which are the people that run all of the factories and all the internal software and their e-commerce part of their website. And then there's a whole other section called CMA, which is Corporate Marketing Agency, which effectively is a massive shadow IT piece. And they run the rest of the website, which is a very rich, interactive website that's full of lots of video and things to engage with their enormous client base out there. I imagine all of us have got some Lego in our house somewhere. I actually have a few bits just right by my desk. So the discovery,
Anyway.
yeah. So Lego had some big problems, and one of the big problems was this kind of them and us thing. Again, it's something we see frequently, but by no means everywhere. But this real kind of, and there were so many different them and us's, not just between CIT and CMA. It was like departmental, and the ops people work in that building across one side of Billund, and the dev people on the other side of town. So trying to improve that collaboration, so it became a very cultural piece. From a technology point of view, Lego were quite mature when we first engaged with them. This was last December, as in 2015, so just over a year ago. And then, so the things that they were mature in, for example, is that part of CMA had actually built a continuous delivery tool chain, an early one. CIT had been asked to do it, but CMA ended up doing it because they had the bandwidth. They were like the rich brothers, if you like. They'd also been doing some stuff with ChatOps. In fact, I think around the time that we were with them, one of the guys had just come back from DUS in San Francisco. And then, in fact, in June of this year, Soren, our main contact, Soren's a very common name, Soren Pedersen, came over and presented at the DevOps Enterprise Summit with me. So we were able to kind of give a view of what had been achieved off the back of the assessment in the 6 months since. And there were some really interesting things like kind of the elimination of job titles and the implementation of ChatOps and the prevalence of the continuous delivery and how they've managed to incorporate more into automated testing in it. So they'd achieved quite a lot in the 6 months since we'd originally done the assessment. And there was all sorts of training and workshops and these mini conferences and things going on as well. Is there anything else that you would like to add about Lego? I know you don't know them as well as me, but there might be something jumping out there.
No, I think you covered it quite well, actually. Because I was looking through, obviously I know it quite well from your talks in the past, but yeah, by the sounds of it, I had some good fun over there from what I hear. But no, I think you covered that quite well.
Thank you. So, in terms of a transformation plan, and this has been one of the big challenges for us in the last sort of 3 years, is how to help people transform. What are the specific activities that we do as a result of assessment when we've identified that there are things that want to change? So we've been developing our offering in this area. This is from an insurance company that we recently performed back in September an assessment with. And quite often a trigger or a good time to implement DevOps thinking is around a big replatforming. So again, those of us who know us well and will know that we're quite good friends with Hiscox, one of our customers, and Hiscox are very vociferous about their use of DevOps and what they do. And they started doing DevOps at Hiscox when they wanted to replatform their main policy admin and underwriting systems. So transformation plan, what we recommend is that you treat it like a agile project. So you have a DevOps product backlog, and within that we have the OIA, so the organizational activities, the interaction activities, and the automation activities. And we have these different streams. And we have the different milestones where we can say, right, we've agreed the metrics that matter, we've automated environment provisioning, we've got continuous delivery, we're reporting on the metrics that matter correctly now, and we can start putting the business cases in. So just wanted to, as we're kind of drawing to an end, just wanted to put up a couple of slides coming from a typical report as well. So this is a not untypical, in fact, actually quite unbusy, believe it or not, picture of what somebody's automation stack might look like. So you've got the DevOps loop in the background. We've talked about IVA, so ideation to realization, via integration, validation, operation. Then you've got all of these tools that this particular customer was using. And then one of the things that we're trying to do is really simplify that. And our DevOps loop is basically based on Atlassian and Dynatrace technology. Atlassian to help us track all the way through where these features are. And then Dynatrace to do the value realization bit, so the reporting on what is actually happening. And then we've also got a partnership with Sonatype, who are the makers of the Maven and Nexus repositories, which enables us to build security in very early into the software as well. So Ryan, I know you were quite keen to include this one, which I think is our final slide today. Did you want to just make a couple of comments on that, or did you want me to talk it?
I'll let you talk it through, but yeah, the reason why I sort of wanted to include this is sort of it just looks at the stages of people taking on DevOps and what they can actually expect from from it. So as you can see in the red stage, you got the power by chief, keep troops in line. When we talk about holacracy, it's all about sort of getting rid of that typical hierarchy or bureaucracy that's very sort of an old school view nowadays. So obviously when you move up to the teal area, looking at self-organizing teams, self-managed teams, coaches when needed. So we're moving away from the bureaucracy, moving away from sort of the political hierarchy that we're very much used to. And you make a good point in one of your previous talks about sort of working as sort of like a biological cell as such, where you're sort of self-motivated, you're working on the, everyone's working across different types of roles, but all for the benefit of the products that you're working on. So I just thought this was a great sort of look or overall look at what you can expect at different levels on the DevOps journey. So I don't know if you wanted to expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to go backwards actually through OIA for a second. So in terms of DevOps Nirvana, or that North Star where you're aiming for what people's desired future state typically looks like, if I take OIA backwards, so if I start with the A, which is automation, people typically know, because we're technologists, we want continuous integration, then we want continuous delivery, then we want continuous deployment. Actually, what we really want is a continuous release cycle end to end that does ideation to realization. So we know that, and we can work out what the steps are to there. From an interactions perspective, we know that we need to do things like agile, and we know that we need to do a test-driven or behavior-driven development. We know that we want to have deployment and change management handled on all of those processes. But when we look at the organisation part or the cultural part, it's often quite difficult to articulate what we want it to be. And some people might know things that they don't want it to be. So they don't want it to be stressful. They don't want people to be having burnout. They don't want people to be frustrated because they can never get anything done. But this organisation evolution consideration from Frederick Lally's book and the similar things. And actually, it's a lot about holacracy. They help us drive the maturity matrix for what a cultural evolution will look like. And that's quite hard to do because we are effectively suggesting about changing multiple humans' behaviours. And that's something that takes quite a lot of time and quite a lot of effort. We have another webcast coming up in a few weeks. I think it might be about a month or two out with Dynatrace, when we'll be talking about how DevOps and tools in particular can help influence changes in the culture, because it's a connection that's not often made. So how do we actually change those humans' behaviour?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say most companies that we work with are sort of around the second and third mark, but everything is changeable. We've seen companies that grow internally, improve from sort of the bottom up, but this can also happen top down as well. So nothing lost, everything can be improved. But yeah, there's also a lot of companies that we now work with that are in the green and teal stage. So yeah, good point. Sorry, I was just
I mean,
recovering.
We do ask people often, actually, as part of the assessment. We either use this table or we use the Western table that people are probably quite familiar with as well, that often pops up in the State of DevOps reports, actually, and ask people to self-assess where they put themselves. And most organisations we work with are sort of around amber orange at the moment. But this is where we need to head forward. So that is the last little topic we wanted to cover off with you today. We've just slightly over our 45 minutes. I can't see any questions in the answer box at the moment or in the chat area, but now is the time to ask any questions if there's anything burning. If not, then we will thank you all for your time today.
And I think it's just worth, on a final note, sorry, Helen, we've been asked a few times when we go and do the sort of discoveries, whether or not we lead through the entire transformations as well. Yes, indeed, we do. We sit and advise, we come in and coach, we give you the tools necessary to reach the end goal of where you want to be. So the DevOps discovery or DevOps maturity assessment is a great starting point, but we're there to sort of guide you through the entire journey as well, which is always good to bear in mind, following sort of the baselining exercise, if you will.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think that's really, things like the DMI are really key to that process. So us regularly testing that DMI every 6 months over a sort of a 2-year transformation is really key to see those improvements and revisiting those business cases that we put together at the start. And I know some organisations we've spoken to have kind of said they wouldn't really necessarily want the person that did the assessment to do the transformation. Other organisations do absolutely see it as the first step in the journey. So it's just a matter of personal preference and something we can discuss quite happily.
Indeed.
So thank you everybody for your time today, and thank you Ryan also, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks everyone, see you soon.
Bye everyone.